I'd like to introduce my co-presenter for this evening. I mentioned my brother Tim. He had a roommate. We all lived at Alumni Hall. One of our dorm roommates or dorm friends, right over here. But Tim's roommate was a guy, he was very friendly, very funny, engineering student, so kind of a contradiction in terms. And I always enjoyed my time with him. But I started hearing funny stories about him in the years after he graduated. I heard this crazy story about that he became an expert on the Shroud of Turin and was hanging out with royalty like the Habsburgs over in Europe. And the next thing I heard, he wasn't a musician at Notre Dame, or ever. And next thing I heard, he was writing musicals. And that he was writing music that was being played by the Atlanta Pops and the Palm Springs Symphony. Then he went out and had the temerity to write a book and got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. And he's currently producing a documentary about human trafficking that I think is going to make some waves. And it was all true. And I started thinking to myself, man, this guy is a show-off if I ever met one. Jack Sacco, everyone.
John's such a small guy. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I tell you, John called me up and said, he was going to do this presentation, asked me if I'd like to be part of it. I said, I didn't play football. I don't know where the champion part comes in, but I'll never pass up an opportunity to speak at the University of Notre Dame because I love Notre Dame. The people who know me know that I love Notre Dame so much that I'll sometimes just start to tear up about this place. And it's not just the beauty of the place, it's the people. It's the people that you know here and you know something about them. Unlike John, I was not a musician when I got to the University of Notre Dame. In fact, I played in the band in high school. They rated me to be the second worst trumpet player on earth. There was a guy in Kuala Lumpur, a little kid, said he was worse than me. But I came here, and I just had nothing to do with music. I was doing engineering. I didn't have time to do anything other than study and tell Tim Scully stories and aggravate him. But other than that, that was all I had. That was all I was doing. And one day I was over at Washington Hall. I sat down. Some friends of mine invited me over to a party, and I went and sat down. And there was a piano there, and they said, "Sit down and play something." Everybody was playing something, and so it was my turn. I sat down and I asked them what they wanted to hear. And I think somebody said "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." I said, okay, so I just figured it out. And by the end of the piece, I was playing all up and down the keyboard and doing all this stuff. And I looked up and everybody was staring at me, kind of like you are. And somebody said, "How did you do that?" I said, "I don't know." They said, "Can you play anything else?" I said, "I think so." They said, "Can you play Hey Jude?" I said, okay. So I just played that. And then I played for a couple of hours that night. I just remember my arms were so sore. It's like, these are muscles I've never used. But something, I don't know what happened. Something clicked or something happened. But anyway, I was able to do that. I didn't have to go through the painful process that John did of trying to figure it out. It just sort of was there. But anyway, I came up here from Alabama. I'd never been to Notre Dame. My whole family went to the University of Alabama. My cousin was named Johnny Musso. He played at Alabama, and you know who he is. And then everybody else went there, and I got scholarships to a few places, and one of them was to Notre Dame. And set foot on this campus. And when I did, I said, "I'm home. This is it. This is where I belong." And I remember my parents dropped me off. They came to the little orientation, whatever, and they dropped me off, and then they left. And I was thinking, oh, this is so incredible, beautiful place. And as soon as they went down Notre Dame Avenue, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I'm 650 miles away from home. I don't know anybody here. And I just started walking around. And I'm actually going to pick up this story in a few minutes. But I went to class, got my engineering degree, bugged Tim Scully as much as I could, met his his brother, impressive, and just went to class and graduated eventually, and then went off and worked. I worked for Boeing Aerospace in Seattle, and then I worked for the Alabama Power Company. I was actually teaching other engineers how to design nuclear power plants. I did that for a couple of years. I mean, honestly, when you design one nuclear power plant, you've designed them all. You know, it's true. I mean, there's so many regulations. You have to, every nut and bolt, everything had to be exactly this way or that way. You know, there's no improvising. There's no self-expression. Unless you want to build Chernobyl, then go ahead. Feel yourself, feel free. Just do whatever you want. But we weren't allowed to do that. So I was teaching other engineers how to do that. I did that for a couple of years. And I just said, you know what? I'm not being true to myself. I had the engineering degree. I said, there's something, I'm not being true to myself. There's something that I'm not a theologian, but I just felt like God had given me some gifts and I wasn't using them. And the nuns used to always tell us, you know, you don't put your light under a barrel. You use them for the world. And that's one of the things I learned here at Notre Dame, like use your gifts. And so I felt like I was not doing that. So I quit doing that and just went in a completely different direction. And I went to work for a nun called Mother Angelica. You ever heard of her? Nun. She went to work for a nun. Yeah. Which I went to work for the nun. I worked there for a few years, which is why I don't have to go to purgatory now. The Pope wrote me a letter and said, look, you work there, you're out of purgatory. In fact, here's some free beer coupons for the Vatican bar. Knock yourself out, enjoy life. We got you. So I did that. And then let's see, what did I do after that? I went to Los Angeles. I said, you know what? I'm a producer, I'm a kind of a big shot, you know? So I'm gonna go to Los Angeles. So I went to Los Angeles and was doing okay. And then things started to go wrong. Things started to go bad. And everywhere I turned, the door was closed. And I was wondering, like, what's wrong with me? I mean, there must be something wrong with me, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. And I did that for a while. And then I actually started to get really, I'll say it, depressed. You know, we all get depressed, whether we admit it or not. We all have those times when we're down or we're wondering what's going on. My father did all through the war, he told me. And so I thought, well, you know, I remember going home once. And, you know, people were telling me, you know what? Well-meaning friends, Kathy knows this, well-meaning friends of mine were saying, you know what? God wants you to suffer. He wants you, this is God, this is wonderful. You should be thankful. God wants you to be miserable. And I was like, I don't like it. I don't like it. And then, you know, I went home once. It was around Christmas. And I went from Los Angeles home, and this is the truth. I've never told this, but I was washing a fork. I got up from breakfast or lunch or something, and was washing a fork for like 20 minutes. Just standing there, just wash this fork. And my mother came over to me. She said, Are you okay? And I said, no. She said, what's wrong? And I said, you know, and I told her, I said, I'm just down. I mean, the last year and a half has been so tough, and I don't know what's wrong. And she said, what do you mean? And I just went through it with her, and I said, you know, I'm trying all these things. There must be something wrong with me. I said, she said, what are you talking about? I said, apparently I have all these talents. I have all these gifts. I have all this great education, Notre Dame, for crying out loud. And I feel like everybody else at Notre Dame is successful. Everybody else has got it together. Everybody else is doing their thing. Everybody else is a champion. I'm going the opposite direction. So my mother said to me, in the last couple of years, did anybody take your education away from you? I said, no. She said, did they take any of those talents away from you? I said, no. She said to me this. She said, Jack, remember who you are. Remember who you are. And it got me thinking, well, that's a good question. I've been thinking about the problem so much that I don't even remember who I am. Who am I? One thing I knew that I was Notre Dame. I knew I was from here, and I knew that I'd been here, and I'd been in this place with these special people, okay? And I said, this is something that's positive in my life that I know is positive. So I called up my great friend Kathy Sullivan. Do you know Kathy Sullivan? One of the most incredible people you will ever meet is named Kathy Sullivan, and she's sitting right there, and we've been friends for a long time. Kathy, I called up Kathy. I said, Kathy, I need to come up to Notre Dame. Okay, and so we were talking through it, and Kathy would be telling me, look, Jack, I know things are tough, but I said, I'm ashamed to set foot on campus. I really was. I thought, that's how bad I thought of it. I thought, I'm not successful. Something's wrong with me. Kathy said, we love you, and Notre Dame loves you. I'm thinking, how? So I came up to campus. She actually put me in the home with Tim McBride and Tish McBride, who are right there, okay? And Mr. John Scully here had introduced me to Kevin Hart, whose father won this Heisman Trophy right here. And anyway, so I have this core group of people around me. And I'm walking around the campus, and I'm remembering who I am. And I remembered the incredible inspiration of Father Soren. Let me just grab this right here. And we have a picture, we have a photograph here. In 1879, the university burned down. Okay, here's a photograph of the Golden Dome. Okay, that's it. That's what was left. And let's show the next one. Another picture of that. 1879. And then the next one. So an overview. This is what it looked like. This is a drawing, obviously. But Father Soren, now people were telling him, all right, Father Soren, it's over. Your dream is over. Go back to France. You gave it a good shot. Obviously, God didn't want that. It was like those people telling me, God wants you to be miserable. Well, maybe not, So this is a quote from Father Soren, and I remembered it that week that I was up here. Quote, "This fire has been my fault. I came here with a vision of a great university and named it after the Mother of God. Then we had a great building, or so I thought. But she had to burn it to the ground to show me that my vision was too narrow and that I had dreamed too small a dream." So they rebuilt it into that. Okay. You know what it's like now. It's iconic all over the world. The Golden Dome of Notre Dame and what this place stands for. And while I was here, I also listened to people like Kathy and Tim and Kevin and people, and I listened to them, and I said, I have to believe them that, who am I? I have to believe them when they tell me who I am. And because we can get sidetracked very easily. You know that in a game of football and game of life and anything else, the momentum can take you off in another direction. So I went back to Los Angeles, and I invited a group of friends over to my apartment, which, I had to figure out how I was going to pay the rent and all this. So I invited some friends over. I handpicked about 15 or 20 people who had been with me through everything, thick and thin. And you hear about the fair weather friends, especially in a place like Los Angeles. But it wasn't like that. They were good people. And so they were always with me. And so I invited them over, cooked up a good I can cook real good spaghetti sauce. And so I cooked up a big pot of that and invited some friends, and we ate. And at the very end of the dinner, I said, I just wanted to address everyone and let you know why I invited you here tonight. We do this all the time, but tonight was special. What's the occasion? I said, well, all of you know that the last year has been very difficult for me, and the last year and a half, and you stuck with me throughout it. I wasn't giving you anything. I wasn't giving you a ride in a helicopter or anything like that. You came, you wanted to be with me, and I wanted to thank you. I just wanted to thank you. Instead of being thankful for all the bad stuff, let me be thankful for the good stuff. Let me be thankful for Notre Dame. Let me be thankful for these friends. Let me be thankful for the people who reminded me who I am and who stuck with me. So at the end of that, they all kind of raised their glass, and and then I happened to be standing in front of a bookshelf, and on the bookcase behind me was a picture of my father. And someone said, "Is that your father?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was the picture that's on the cover of the book. And that's outside for sale. And, I said, yeah, that's my father. He was, they said, was he in World War II? I said, yeah, he was in World War II. They said, what did he do? I said, well, he landed at Omaha Beach. He fought with General Patton. He was there when General Patton gave that great speech. And then he, at the very end of the war, he liberated a concentration camp. And they said, oh my God. He did. And I was thinking, well, they said, you should write a book. And I said, no. Look, in my wisdom, I said, no, that's not a good idea, because I could probably write a book. I mean, I've read a book. I know the basic structure of a book, beginning, middle, end, a lot of words in between. I could do that. But I've kind of, at this point in my life, gotten accustomed to living indoors and eating food and all that. So I won't be able to do that if I write a book, because I'm not one of these people who can do a bunch, I focus on what I'm doing. I focus on it. I think that's how I figured out how to play the piano. I just really focused on it one day and it just popped out. So if I'm going to write a book, it's going to take me some time. I'm going to focus on that. I want it to be done correctly. It'll take me a year. And somebody's going to have to pay for it. So they said, well, you can get people saying you can have it published, but you got to get an agent. The way to get it published, you have to get an agent. You can't get a book published without an agent. So I said, okay. So that over there. So I said, okay, so I went and I said, let me find an agent. How do you find an agent? You just go around and talk to them. So I wrote up a couple of chapters. I wrote up an outline, and I went to different agents around Los Angeles, and I said, how do I want you to see about getting me a publisher. So the agents would tell me, the ones who would talk to me, most of them would not talk to me. They said, nobody knows who you are. They were all negative. The ones who would talk to me would say, nobody's going to read your book. Nobody's going to publish your book. If you might want to get a couple, maybe get a couple of hundred printed up yourself, and because you're only going to sell maybe 150 books. That's it. No, but we've heard everything about World War II. And I said, no, we haven't heard everything about World War II, because this is different. This is a different story. I said, and I gave them this, I'll tell you, a story within a story. I told them this story in the middle of that. I said, look, I gave a talk on the physics of the Shroud of Turin, the physics of the resurrection. I gave a talk on that to the royal families of Europe. And so there was the Prince of Liechtenstein, the Princess of Luxembourg, the Habsburg family, all these people were there. One of the guys there was named Georg von Hohenberg. Georg von Hohenberg was a member of the Habsburg family. He's the grandson of the Archduke Ferdinand. So I spent the week with him, and we were talking, and he, and I was asking him about his grandparents. He was telling me all these stories about, Rasputin, this, and my grandfather. He said Rasputin was a very nice chap. It's kind of hard to kill, other than that, pleasant fellow. And just by the way, this is the sort of the conversations. Now, John told me, he said, you got 4 minutes, you got 5 minutes, and 4 of your minutes are this video. So wrap it up, okay? So, sorry, but I just tell you this little part. I was walking one day with Margareta Luxembourg, just out in the courtyard, and her dog Scooby-Doo. And she was telling me, she said, Jack, I got a call from Elizabeth the other day, and I was thinking, there's only a few of us here. Who's Elizabeth? She said, in England, the Queen. I said, you know her? She said, she's my cousin. She said, anyway, she called me. She said, Margareta, can you explain to me why my children act as if they're insane? So these are the conversations that go on with the royalty. So I was hanging with them. And so at the end of the week, I was sitting there with Georg von Hohenberg, the grandson of the Archduke Ferdinand, and all of us were sitting around in a circle having biscuits. And they're actually cookies, by the way. They'll say they're biscuits, but they're cookies. And so I said, he had just resigned from being the ambassador from Austria to the Vatican. I said, Mr. Ambassador, you were so patient with me all week, peppering you with questions about your grandfather, your grandmother. And I said, I never asked you anything about your father. Tell me something about your own father. And of all the things he could have told me about that man's life, he said, my father was a prisoner of war during World War II, and he was in the Dachau concentration camp. I said, are you familiar with the liberation of Dachau? He said, Sunday morning, April 29th, 1945. I said, there were about 200 American soldiers that morning who were there. He said, I'm well aware of that. I said, well, my father was one of them. And when I said that, he stood up. Three-piece. This is a man who would have been the emperor had his grandfather lived. He stood up. He straightened his jacket, handlebar mustache, the whole thing. When he stood up, the Princess of Luxembourg stood up. Prince Liechtenstein stood up. The Contessa stood up. All these people stood up. I didn't know what to do, so I stood up. So, something's going on. And he walked up to me. He walked across to me, and he embraced me, and he said, please convey to your father my family's most sincere gratitude. I said, so I'm telling the agent that story. I said, this is a big story. The agent said, listen to that whole thing and said, nah, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to care about that. I said, oh, okay. I don't know. It seemed like what. So I decided, I did that for a few months, and then I just said, you know what? I'm getting depressed again. What's wrong? So I came up with some principles. I changed the principles. I said, I need to change some of the things that I'm doing. And I changed, and I actually keep those things, honest to God, in my pocket. Those principles that I came up with, because they were the things that are rooted right here in this place at Notre Dame for 4 years, and then at Notre Dame for that week that I was here to resurrect, to rise again, and I wrote them down because they changed my life. And this was, when John was talking to me, and this would be about how to be a champion. Well, this is how this was my recipe, because I had to learn. In school, at Notre Dame, in every good school, they will teach you a lesson, and then they will give you a test. Okay? That's not the way it is in life. In life, they give you the test first. Then you see if you can figure out what the lesson was. Okay? And if you can't figure it out, you just keep taking that test over and over. Okay? So I decided, let me figure out what some of these lessons are. And so this is what I did. I have them. I obviously know them by heart. I wouldn't have to read them, right? But the first one was this. I realized I was going around talking to these guys and asking for their permission. And I realized never ask for permission to succeed. Never ask for permission to succeed. You want to do something good? Don't ask other people for permission. They're going to say no. And you know what? The people who tell you no, you know what they all have in common? Two things. Number one, they've never done it. Number two, they never will. So don't ask other people for permission to succeed. You want to see succeed, you succeed. End of story. So I said, okay, I'm not asking these guys for permission anymore. Second one, I read that the ancient Greeks, for them, wisdom was not so much in the answer as it was in the question. Ask yourself the right question. I was asking, remember I said it, what's wrong with me? Well, your brain is a problem-solving tool. That's all it does. It's like the world's greatest problem solver. It's solving problems right now as you're sitting there. It's regulating your breathing, your temperature, everything. Your heart rate, it's solving problems. And if you ask it the wrong question, we had a thing over here in engineering where we could prove 1 = 2 because you start with a false premise. And every part of that proof is true, but the first question is wrong. So if you ask, we call it garbage in, garbage out. You ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer. So you cannot ask, what is wrong with me, or why is this not working? That's not the right question, because your brain is it doesn't know what you're asking it, and it's going to say, well, because you're a schmuck. That's why. It's all I give it. You want an answer, I gave you an answer. Here's the question: how? How do I do this? I asked myself, what am I looking for? Well, I'm really not looking for an agent. I'm looking for a publisher. So the next question, not why can't I find one or what's wrong with me? No, how do I find a publisher? And I just went to bed, and it's amazing. Your brain just keeps trying to figure stuff. And I'll tell you this. I woke up the next morning, and I realized I got a friend who's written about 10 books, and he's got them all published. Let me just call him, get his advice. I called him. He said, oh, send me what you have. I sent it to him. He said, I have a meeting with HarperCollins on Friday. Is it okay if I bring this and show it to him? I said, yeah. He did. They called me up and said, we'd like to publish your book. And the book was published. It was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies. We're making it into a movie now. And, just you never ask for permission to succeed. Another thing that I learned from this young lady here, Kathy Sullivan, when I was up at Notre Dame, she took me out horseback riding. Now, I know about as much about horses as I do about trumpets. You know, I couldn't even know if I could say it. So I'm up on the horse, and there's a guy named Kenny, right? Kenny's walking beside me. He's like, do you know how to ride a horse? Do I look like I know how to ride a horse? No. He's like, okay. So he's walking. He said, the horse will go into the wall. If you're not careful, the horse will just go into the wall and scrape along the wall. I said, well, he said, don't let the horse go to the wall. I said, how do I do that? He said, don't look at the wall. Okay, I'm wondering what you're wondering. How does the horse know where I'm looking? He said, the horse knows where you're looking. Okay. So I'm up there, and he's walking right beside me, and the horse is getting closer and closer to the wall. The horse gets right up next to the wall. The wall is scraping right on me. Kenny said, where's the horse going, Jack? I said, into the wall. He said, what are you looking at? I said, the wall. He said, looks where you want the horse to go. And instead of, I thought to steer the horse, he would tell me, you got to pull this way and lean, kick and all. He said, look, when I looked that way, everything, my whole body leaned, everything moved, and the horse just started going that direction. In every direction I would look, the horse would go. And so it was amazing. So I learned a very valuable principle there. Always, you'll go in the direction you're looking, but make sure you know what you're looking for. Don't look at the wall. My brother works for NASCAR. He's an official for NASCAR. And, I talk to the drivers. I know them, and they're like, we know where the wall is. We don't look at it. If you look at it, you're going to hit it. We know where it is. Don't look at it. Same thing with our problems. You know where they are. You know what they are. Don't focus on them because you're going to hit them over and over and over. So ask the right question. And so that was a very valuable thing. And then I'm going to come back now to when my parents dropped me off. And this is the final principle that I learned. When my parents dropped me off that afternoon, I was walking around campus like a moron and just like I didn't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And I saw these two priests out there behind the dome. And they were just standing there. Like I was coming up from the grotto, I think, and they were just standing there. And one of them said to me, hey, you look lost. You must be a freshman. I said, I am. He said, come here. So I walked over. He said, reached his hand out. He said, I'm Father Ted Hesburgh. This is Father Ned Joyce. And I said, wow. And he said, and we talked for a little while. Where are you from? And all that. And he said, what are you doing for dinner? I said, I'm going to try to find the dining hall. Then I'll probably go in there and eat. And he said, you want to join us? I said, yeah. He said, we're waiting for a professor here named Emil T. Hoffman to join us. So he said, he's coming out of that building, right? He's the dean of freshman year of studies at that point. And you all know who I'm talking about. So he comes out, the four of us go to dinner. I don't know where it was. It was someplace nice. So we go out to eat. And Father Hesburgh's sitting right here to my left. And the other two, and at some point in the dinner, we were like, I didn't know what to get. I was like, at the table, I was like, I want to get the cheapest thing here, And then Father Hesburgh's like, get yourself a steak. That's what we're getting. Okay, got a steak. So I'm sitting there, and partway through the dinner, Father Hesburgh leans over to me, and he said, hey, Jack, what do you want to accomplish while you're here at Notre Dame? What's your goal? And I said, ooh, good question. I said, so I thought, well, here's my shot. I mean, this is it. I'm going to impress him. I'm going to tell him what my goal is. I said, well, Father Hesburgh, I made really good grades in high school, got a scholarship here. So I want to make straight A's. I want to make straight A's at Notre Dame. He said, he just looked at me. He said, I kind of wish you wouldn't. I said, what? He said, you know what? He said, you could do it. He said, you got in here. You already got in. You could make the grades. You could do it. He said, but there are guys who come to Notre Dame and they make straight A's, but all they do is sit in their rooms or sit in the library for 4 years. They don't have any friends. He said, you could do it, but it's okay if you mix in a B now and then. It's fine. He said, but I want you to have the Notre Dame experience. Get to know the people here. They're going to be very important in your life if you get to know them. Embrace this place. Embrace Notre Dame, not just the books. And I thought that wasn't what I was expecting to hear, And so I realized, these years later, when I was thinking about who am I, remember who I am. I remember that conversation with Father Ted, and I remember what he was telling me was, hey, be compassionate with yourself. And that's one of my principles. It's so easy for me, it's so easy for you guys, because I'm looking around here, I see a lot of champions. I see a lot of great people who've done a lot of great things. And it's easy to be tough on yourself. Like, I got to win everything. I got to make all A's. Well, Father Hesburgh said, you're a winner by getting in here. You're a winner. There's a difference between a winner and a champion. You know how I know that? Because there's two different words. That tells you that there's a difference. So winner might be the winner, but he might not be the champion. Be the champion. Have the bigger vision. Be compassionate with yourself. Understand that you will fail. Understand that frustration is part of the process. You're saying God's going to love you. He made us each imperfect. He made us, and like I say, I'm not a theologian, but I know that God made us this way, and we can strive and all that, but we can't be too hard on ourselves. I mean, Lou Holtz was up here at the Blue Gold game, I think, and he was saying that he said, I got a bumper. Well, I'm going to say it. I'm already committed. Lou Holtz said he had a bumper sticker that says, hey, Jesus loves you, but everybody else thinks you're an asshole. So, it's okay. I used to want everybody to be my friend. I used to want everybody to like me. And honestly, that's the one thing even God can't do. Even God can't please everybody. Somebody's going to be upset. So you can quote Lou Holtz for that. So anyway, those are the principles, and obviously there were a lot more, but those are the main core, and I think about those all the time. And honestly, I keep this in my pocket. So if there's just time where I'm doubting myself or just have a moment, I'll just take them out and look at them, and they just get me right back to that spot that I need to be in. And I know this. We showed at the beginning the video of my book. By the way. Like I say, John told me, get off, your time is up, I'm going to cut your mic. So I don't have time to tell you these stories, but I'm going to tell you about the stories, okay? I'm not going to tell you the story, but I'm going to tell you about the story. So one time, I got the opportunity, I was in the booth with Ara Parsegan and whoa, Nelly, what's his name? Keith Jackson. Yeah, I should know that. I was in the booth with him. While they were broadcasting a game, and if they'd have pulled the camera out from those two, you'd have seen Forrest Gump here. You'd have seen your boy, Forrest, like sitting there, right next to Ara. And Ara and I had watched the Notre Dame-Michigan game right before that, just sitting in some folding chairs. And I just want to let you know, Ara goes crazy at the games. He's like John Kennedy over there. He goes crazy at the football game. He would yell at the TV, which I loved. So I got to do that. And one time, believe it or not, John doesn't even know this, I got to be, you remember the USFL? There was a USFL, is that still, and it was a Birmingham Stallions football team. I got to be their quarterback one day. I did the paperwork and everything. Now, I'm not going to tell you, I can't tell you the whole story, unfortunately. You can thank John for that. But I did all these things because I just figured out how to ask the right questions to the right people at the right time. And you'd be amazed, a lot of times, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Anyway, my father's at Omaha Beach, and I realized then that he had used every one of these things. When they landed there, they didn't ask for permission. They just went and did what they needed to do. They asked the right questions, not why am I here? Am I going to die? And all that. Just how do we take that hill? How do we win? How do we stay alive? They looked at the right direction. They knew what they were looking for. They looked at it, and they also knew they weren't perfect. They knew that they were going to suffer. They knew they were going to suffer losses. Their friends were going to die. It was going to be tough. And so what I would ask each of you to do, pray for me because John's going to hit me when this is finished. But I would ask each of you to do in your own life, in this idea of how to be a champion, is this: remember who you are, and pray to God. Remember your friends in your life. Remember the Kathy Sullivans and the Tim McBrides and the Tish McBrides and the Kevin Harts and the John Scullys and the Tim Scullys in your life. Remember these people in your life because they will save your life, because they will be there for you. They were there for me, and they will always be. There are people in your life who will always be there. Believe them when they tell you who you are. And Remember your week here at Notre Dame. Remember your time here at Notre Dame. Remember your conferences. Remember this evening. And remember the beautiful campus. Remember the lady on the dome as she glistens and she reaches out her hand, beckons us each to rise again and to walk with her son onward to eternal victory. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.